everybody. Welcome back to the Bridge Towards Wealth. I'm Christopher Klepp, wealth manager at Strategic Financial Group, where we help business owners in and outside of their business expand to their vision. Today, we're welcomed by Mark Brodson. He's president and managing broker of Resource Commercial Advisors, a Chicagoland-based boutique commercial real estate firm with a couple areas of focus. First, tenant representation or leasing, helping his firms answer the question, should I stay or should I go? Secondly, he helps with private off-market investment sales, solving investors' primary challenge of how can I find and secure great real estate. Today, we're talking how having the right approach to real estate can help you grow your business. Welcome, Mark. Excited to have you on Bridge Towards Wealth today.
Thank you, Chris. Very happy to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, before we get going here, tell us a bit about your background and how you ended up founding Resource Commercial Advisors.
Sure. Well, I did a long 16-year stint in the corporate world and basically figured out that when I grew up, I wanted to do something a little bit more entrepreneurial. So I began to build my real estate business on the side of a full-time sales manager job. And in 2007, I left the corporate world for good and went into commercial real estate. And I was very fortunate because I had one deal in my pipeline when I left the corporate world that turned out to be a big deal, $33 million that closed on October 5th, 2007, which as an investment advisor, you remember, was 3 weeks before Lehman went down. So I'm very fortunate that that deal closed. It was probably the last CMBS deal to get done before the market crashed. And had that deal not gotten done, I might not be here today talking to you about commercial real estate.
Well, that's amazing. It's crazy how how sometimes a little bit of fate, a little bit of luck plays into our lives as entrepreneurs. And I hear your story about, and I see this so many times, people unhappy in that corporate, lifestyle, wanting to be their own boss, having that entrepreneurial spirit. I love it. And we've seen a lot of that, right? Happen over the last few years. A lot of people moving from the traditional corporate jobs where they didn't feel like they were being valued anymore in that area, moving to the entrepreneurship. So what's been your experience over the last few years, seeing businesses sprout up? Are you seeing more people entering the arena, first time looking for real estate as that entrepreneur? Or are you seeing more businesses that, serial entrepreneurs just looking to expand their existing business or get into new ventures?
Well, it's interesting, Chris. If you had asked me that question 6 months ago, I would have told you that the investment market was as hot as it had ever been. And that was really because 3% money really drives a lot of the engine that is the transaction portion of our business. But if you fast forward now 6 months, and now we're looking at 6.5% and 7% money, there's a very different feeling out there. Now, I will tell you that transactions from entrepreneurs have not shut down altogether. We are definitely seeing activity more from the folks who have capital to deploy. And as you know, cash sitting in the bank in a rapidly expanding inflationary climate loses value day by day. We have a lot of well-capitalized, well-heeled investors who have been waiting for their moment to deploy cash. And what's interesting is from a seller's standpoint, it used to be much more of a seller's market with a very limited inventory. But now that we're seeing less capital from our buyers that have to leverage their purchases, it's really the folks that have the cash who are in the driver's seat because they can take advantage of good deals because they can act quickly and don't have to submit to 7% financing rates.
Gotcha. So really, as often the case, right? Cash is king in this scenario, and so you're still seeing it's just shifted on where you're seeing it from. Obviously, the rising interest rates have had a large effect, and obviously having an effect largely in your business as well, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I think overall we anticipate a net slowdown. And if you talk to anybody from a title company, they are bracing themselves for the wave. They've definitely seen a downturn in residential activity, and they're worried that once the current wave of commercial transactions that were in the pipeline that locked in interest rates, once that works its way through, they're a little concerned about a slowdown there as well.
Gotcha. Well, so, I've always been taught when you're thinking of real estate, it's about location, location, location. So can you tell me, what should business owners and entrepreneurs and, even investors be thinking about in their decision to either to locate their business or the type of properties that they're buying in the current market? What should they be thinking about location these days?
Well, you're absolutely spot on, Chris. Everything that drives value in real estate is location driven. And I think the big question that an investor needs to look at is, should I invest in a downtown major urban center right now? And that's really a tension, because if you walked around downtown recently, downtown Chicago on a Monday or a Friday, it's really empty, almost eerily empty. And so if you're looking to own real estate down there and looking to attract tenants who are going to be a part of your real estate, that has to be a definite consideration. Now, we're not expecting that the current trends are going to be around indefinitely. Chicago has withstood the test of time, as has other urban centers, and we see ebbs and flows. That being said, there are a lot of great businesses that are now boarded up, and we don't know if they're going to come back. So the short answer to your question, Chris, is you have to really take a look at other drivers, like transportation oriented assets that are maybe in some of these downtown suburban areas where the train station is right across the street, because those properties tend to give you more flexibility, right? If the downtown world comes back, you're going to have lots of commuters going to that train station and using that, but walking by your property every day. And if the urban environment doesn't come back readily, suburban households are patronizing their downtown areas. And so therefore, you can expect a good amount of traffic from a property that is located in a downtown suburb.
Well, I think that's a fantastic idea, right? That's sort of covering all of your bases, particularly, as we both live in the Chicagoland area, thinking about what that means to Chicago. If downtown Chicago does come roaring back, you'll be fine. And if it doesn't, then as we've seen more things open up in the suburbs, I think over the last couple of years, as people not coming back into the city as much, then you're still covered in that way. I think that's a great way to look at it there.
Yeah, and for those of your viewers who are not local Chicago based, I mean, the trends we're talking about for the city of Chicago really are applicable directly to almost every urban area. The only thing I would tell you is on the macro national level, because we do work on a national basis, is we are definitely seeing more demand in the urban centers in the Sun Belt cities. So Nashville, Phoenix, Charlotte, Dallas, Houston, Tampa, even after Hurricane Ian. We are seeing that there's a tremendous uptick there. And actually kind of a net migration from the northern cities, some of the more Midwest cities, down to the Sun Belt areas.
Gotcha. Well, so I think that's fascinating, and so every one of all these business owners that we have out here that are listening, right? That if they've been in the space for a while, right, they all come to that place where it's time for them, to renew, and whether it's the renewal or even walking into a new property, what are some ways that business owners can increase their leverage that they have when they're trying to look at a space and taking a look at lease negotiations? What are some ways that can be helpful for them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And the first answer to that, and the quickest, simplest one, is don't just sign the lease proposal, the lease extension proposal that the landlord sends you. The reason for that is that the landlord has their own fiduciary interests in mind. They're not looking out for your best interests. And so even though it's tempting to say, yeah, my lease is a pain, I'm just going to sign this, we oftentimes see tenants who have done that year in and year out, and we find that they can be 5, 10, $15 over market simply because they didn't employ somebody to help them with knowledge and industry expertise. But that being said, the other direct answer to your question is time is your friend if you get a jump on it. So the common mistake that we see from business owners is that other than just signing the paperwork and sending it back without reading it, the next common mistake is I'm only going to, look at that paperwork 3 months before my lease is up or 2 months before my lease is up. And when you do that, you basically cede all of your leverage to the landlord. Why? Because the landlord knows that 60 to 90 days, for all intents and purposes, is not nearly enough time for you to hire a broker, find a space, sign a lease, build it out, and move in. So what we recommend for our clients, even if you absolutely love your space and you have no intentions of moving, I would say between 12 and 18 months out, you should bring a broker on your team and have the broker reach out to your landlord. And the conversation should go something like this from the broker. Mr. Landlord, we've been retained by XYZ company to evaluate their real estate options. And what that does is it shifts the leverage from the tenant who's renewing 3 months out to, which would be a landlord-focused leverage, that shifts that leverage back to the tenant because now the landlord has that possibility in the back of their mind that the tenant may go elsewhere. And so as a result, they will open up their checkbooks typically and accommodate that tenant in ways that they wouldn't do with only 3 months left to go. Because at the end of the day, landlords want one thing. They want stable rent rolls, and it is worth much more to them if you stay as a tenant than if you go. Because if you go, they have to find a new tenant. They have to have vacancy for a period. They have to pay for a build out. So leverage all of that capital that the landlord would have to spend to bring a new tenant in and put those dollars in your pocket in the form of either free rent or build out on your behalf.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And as a landlord, I would agree. We love stable we love stable rent rolls. We don't want that to change. I mean, so obviously, so having these conversations early makes a lot of sense. So obviously a lot of, and we talk to business owners all the time about that, right? And, for us, it's much more about the exit planning. We recommend our business owners that are in their 30s or 40s start putting together an exit plan. You don't want to wait until the last minute. And in our world, that's the last 3 years, right? Before you're going to make an exit, a planned exit, to do that. So always make time your friend, not your enemy is always wise. I mean, so what are some, so obviously outside of, rushing through the lease process, I mean, are there any other things that you see are common, areas where business owners trip up if they say, oh, I'm just going to handle my own lease renewal. I don't want to bring in a broker. I mean, what are some other things that that you see that a broker really has knowledge of besides, the going market rate? What are some other areas that a broker can add a lot of value to an existing business owner when they're at their lease renewal?
Yeah, great question, Chris. So obviously, first and foremost, it's knowing where your rates stand relative to the market. That's really important. And you don't always know what leases are going for because oftentimes brokers and landlords don't share that information. So if you bring a broker on, they have tools at their disposal that they can use to get that market rate. So beyond that, and we oftentimes do a lot of extra value work with especially our medical tenants, right? So take a dentist, for example. Dentists do all their work with their hands. And so certain clauses that a landlord would never be thinking about, like a death and disability clause, is very important because remember, you might have disability insurance or you might have life insurance, but those insurance coverages are designed to protect you and your family. They're not designed to line the landlord's pockets if for some reason you can no longer practice. So we write into our leases and into our lease renewals death and disability clauses, which basically allow for you to buy out the remaining portion of your lease at a discount in the event that a tragedy happens, either a death or disability event. There are things like associates clauses. Some unscrupulous landlords will say, well, when you signed this lease, you were a sole practitioner and now you have 3 people working for you. So therefore, we're going to charge you more as if, you're making more revenue. Well, if you have an associates clause in your lease, it allows you to add unlimited associates and have those not be construed as subtenants. So the landlord can't get involved and use that as leverage against you in a negotiation. Other clauses, whether you're medical or not, include demolition and relocation clauses. In most leases, landlords typically have the right to remove you and put you into a different space in the building. Or if they want to sell to a developer and the developer wants to build, a demolition and relocation clause by keeping that out of the lease or by putting a collar around what the landlord's rights are, can save you lots of hassle and disruption in terms of having to move your business suddenly because it's a decision that benefits the landlord. So the short answer to your question, Chris, is that there are all kinds of nuances in a lease. As the old saying goes, the devil is in the details. And so we strongly recommend that you bring on a broker. And one last note on that. There's also lots of hidden value locked into a renewal. And as I mentioned in my last answer, that the landlord would much rather keep you as a tenant than bring a new tenant in. And there's huge dollar value. So if you're going to sign a 5-year renewal, for example, you should be getting a combination of free rent, dollars that enable you to renovate your office or your lobby, or other concessions. So maybe you've had the lease for a long time and you have a personal guarantee on it. We want to use that renewal as an opportunity to eliminate that personal guarantee. So, leases are 36 pages long or more typically, Chris. And as you know, if you go through the details, you'll find lots of places where a broker and an attorney, for that matter, can add significant value to you at renewal time.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Anytime a contract's involved, is that you need a specialist that speaks that language, because most business owners don't speak lease, they don't speak insurance contract, they don't speak any of the terms that are in there. That's not what they do every day, and so I think it's a great great value then that a broker can bring to the table. So obviously you help you don't only help business owners, right, with leasing, you help them with buying. I always know how to talk to the business owners about the value of lease versus buy from just from our financial planning standpoint, some taxes. How do you address that, right? So maybe not every business owner wants to be a landlord. They want to buy the building and have some other tenants. I know you work a lot with helping business owners see that vision and realize what could be a very valuable part of their financial plan. So what are you thinking about buy, lease versus buy, and what makes one more attractive than the other, and how can you make that easier for that business owner client out there?
So my answer to your question is going to frustrate you a little bit, but the answer is it depends. There is no cookie cutter solution when it comes to lease versus buy. That being said, I can give you a couple of quick rules of thumb. If the business is growing rapidly and in the capital that's invested is going to result in a return of 15, 20, or 30% or more, just based on the ability to grow that business, we strongly recommend leasing. And the reason for that is that if you are to buy your real estate in a good year, real estate will appreciate between 5 and 7% in value. But if you can take that same capital that you would put into a down payment and turn it into growth capital that gets you 15, 20, 30%, you're much better off leasing. Plus, if you're growing that fast, you need all kinds of expenses to put against your rapidly growing income. And rent is an ideal expense because dollar for dollar, you're allowed to, take that off of your bottom line, and that enables you to have some tax savings. Where we do recommend buy versus lease is a situation where the company is in general slow or stagnant growth, and the owner anticipates being in that location for a long time and or has heirs that they want to pass the company down to. So over time, rent payments add up. And if there's a situation where stability is the long-term forecast, yeah, the owner is much better getting a mortgage going and starting to let the business just pay down that asset. So there is a long-term ownership. We recently worked with a dentist who had 2 kids in dental school who were growing up through the ranks. And so the dentist was faced with, do I put a build out in place, into somebody else's rental property, and then I'm stuck paying years and years of rent when his kids were coming into the business. So this dentist actually invested a total of $1 million in the acquisition of a building and the build out, knowing full well that his exit plan was to bring the kids into the business. So now when those kids get out of school and they start practicing and the dad retires, they are already way ahead of the game because they own the asset that they're in, and they can essentially control the rent that is paid by the practice since they own the asset.
Well, I think that's wise, and I like that you approach it with that nuanced approach, right? Because I know I've seen talk with some people along the way that that always prescribe one or the other, and I think that your more nuanced position makes a lot of sense. And obviously, it is not one size fits all. It's unique to everybody's situation. So, Mark, it's been great talking with you today. If a listener wants to reach out to you after our conversation, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yes, thank you, Chris. Well, the best way to reach me would be via email. And my email, which I'm sure you'll share, is mark@resourcecommercial.net. And we're always happy to take the time, Chris, not only to spend time with you, but really to help educate our clients. And, for those of you who are out there, you selected Chris based on your trusted value that he provides. It's the same with a real estate broker. You should be looking to hire somebody not based on, are they just going to find you a space and negotiate a lease, but are they going to deliver additional value to your business, such as helping you bring financing to the table, helping you bring the right strategic partners to the table, somebody that cares really about the business and sees that real estate is a driver of what you're trying to achieve, but it's not the tail wagging the dog. So I really do encourage anybody that has a real estate issue coming up to either reach out to me or a real estate broker that you know and trust. But just going back to my very first comment, please don't go it alone, because there's so much value that the right resource can unlock for your business.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And Mark, I really want to thank you for your time today. We'll put a link, as you mentioned, below the video here and on our blog, so people can reach out to you. If there's any way Mark can help, please be sure to reach out and contact them. Mark, it's been a pleasure today. Hope everything else goes well for you this week. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in again. This has been your Bridge Towards Wealth.
Thank you, Chris.